On an April morning in 2025, biologist David Samuel Johnson knelt in the mud of a Georgia salt flat and photographed an adult male fiddler crab. To a casual observer, it was just another crab in a marsh. But the animal in front of Johnson was Leptuca thayeri, the Atlantic mangrove fiddler crab, and according to every map drawn before 2020, it had no business being there. That photograph, and dozens like it, have become a sign of a quiet revolution unfolding along the southeastern coast of the US. One documented in the March 2026 volume of the Journal of Crustacean Biology. Geographically, the species is found throughout the warm waters of the western Atlantic. Its native range stretches from Florida through the Caribbean and Central America down to the southern part of Brazil. Within this range, the crab's home is the muddy, shaded interior of mangrove forests. It buries itself in the lower intertidal zone under the roots of mangrove trees. Adults excavate vertical burrows that can extend a foot or more into the sand and mud. These burrows serve as refuges from predators, the heat of low tide, and surviving the cold. A typical mangrove forest can support about 100 Leptuca thayeri individuals per square meter, making the species one of the most abundant animals in its habitat. Feeding is where the crab performs its most important work. Leptuca thayeri is a deposit feeder. Using the delicate CD lining its mouthparts, it lifts small pinches of wet sediment to its maxillae and sifts out all the tiny diatoms, bacteria, fungal hyphae, and various other fragments of detritus. Inedible mineral grains are spat out as small, neatly rolled pellets that accumulate around the burrow entrance. By processing surface sediments grain by grain, the crab thins out all the bacterial populations, redistributes organic matter, and accelerates decomposition. All the burrowing the crabs do is also important for the mangrove's health. Each excavated tunnel pulls oxygen into the mud, allowing aerobic microbes to break down organic compounds that would otherwise stagnate. Iron, sulfur, and nitrogen cycles all hinge on this kind of aeration. Studies in Brazilian mangroves have shown that Leptuca thayeri burrows pull buried organic material to the surface, where small invertebrates and microbes can feed on it. Fiddler crabs as a group are central conduits for nutrients, linking microbial production to higher trophic levels in the food chain. The major reason why these crabs are showing up in new places is their reproduction style. Leptuca thayeri females release their larvae into the sea in the brief window after high tide, when the receding waters carry the baby crabs away from the marshes and into the open currents. After about a month at sea, the larval crabs eventually settle back onto suitable mudflats, undergo metamorphosis into juvenile crabs, and begin their terrestrial life. This entire development sequence proceeds best at around 25 degrees Celsius. This temperature dependence of the larval phase is the reason for the range expansion. Adult fiddler crabs are hardy enough to weather occasional cold snaps in deep burrows, but the floating larvae have no protection. They drift wherever currents carry them, and they need warm water to complete their development. The cool waters off the Carolinas formed an effective thermal wall, keeping Leptuca thayeri south of Jacksonville, Florida on the Atlantic coast and Cedar Key on the Gulf side. That barrier has now broken down. The research team built their case using a combination of fieldwork and crowdsourced observations. They searched iNaturalist for research-grade photographs of Leptuca thayeri, images verified by multiple users in which the crab appeared alive or recently dead and possessed enough body parts to be identified to species. They paired these with their own surveys, in which researchers walked along marsh creeks at low tide, scanning for the orange claw of a male crab. Males have the only reliable visual cue at the species level, because females across many fiddler crab species look nearly identical. The results were clear. 31 iNaturalist observations and 17 personal sightings place Leptuca thayeri well north of Jacksonville, Florida. Confirmed crabs turned up at sites strung from St. Johns County in northeastern Florida, through the islands off the Georgia coast, and across the state line into South Carolina. The northernmost individual was photographed in Beaufort County, South Carolina, a leap of 307 kilometers beyond the species' previous limit. Even stranger than the distance was the habitat. In its native Florida and Caribbean range, Leptuca thayeri is a creature of mangrove forests. But in Georgia and South Carolina, where mangroves are still mostly absent, the crabs were found among the cordgrass and the black needle rush of low salt marshes. On Sapelo Island, Georgia, individuals clustered along creek banks at low tide, often near docks, pilings, and other woody artificial structures. The species has switched habitats, behaving as a true generalist. The authors point to ocean warming. They drew on 22 years of sea surface temperature records from the NOAA buoy off of Savannah, Georgia. Monthly mean summer temperatures from 2017 through 2022 consistently exceeded the 25 degrees Celsius threshold required for larval development. In effect, the thermal door that had kept Leptuca thayeri out of the Carolinas has opened, seasonally at first, but for long enough each year to permit larval survival and settlement. Surviving once you arrived is a separate issue. Adult fiddler crabs slow when air temperatures fall below 14 degrees Celsius and die at 10 degrees, so the cold winters of the Carolinas remain a lethal threat. The Acosta-Rodriguez team suspects that Leptuca thayeri exploits two refuges to get through this bottleneck: deep burrows that extend below the freezing layer and artificial structures such as docks, jetties, and marina pilings, which trap heat and buffer thermal swings. For the future, the researchers estimate that the sea surface temperatures already meet larval requirements as far north as Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, suggesting another 200 kilometers for colonization in coming years. As Leptuca thayeri moves into these new marshes, it will increasingly overlap with other fiddler crabs competing for the same sediments and the same burrows. The most important aspect of this research is who detected the change. Of the 48 confirmed observations underpinning the new northern range, the great majority came not from professional surveys, but from amateur naturalists snapping photographs on their phones during kayak trips, beach walks, or marsh hikes, and then uploading those images to a public database. That a tropical crab from the Brazilian mangroves now scuttles along cordgrass, photographed by tourists and identified by an army of citizen scientists, is a triumph of distributed observation.